In 1996, the first film of the Scream series was released. In this movie, there is a dialogue where Sidney's character says, "You've watched too many sick movies," and then Billy replies, "Look, Sidney, don't blame the movies. Movies don't make psychos. Movies make psychos more creative." Exactly 10 years after the release of this film, to a teenager making a decision with inspiration from Scream, they intend to kill a large number of people so that their case is in the media. All the newspapers and news will write about them. They will gain a lot of fame, and their names will be next to famous serial killers like Zodiac and Ted Bundy. Cassie Jo Studdert was born on December 21, 1989, and in September 2006, she was only 16 years old. She was the first student in her class, and all her family members and friends called Cassie a very responsible, reliable, and kind person. She was social. She had many friends. On September 22, 2006, Cassie was alone at her aunt's and her husband's house. Her aunt's family had left the city for a few days and left their house in someone's hands so that this 16-year-old girl could take care of their 3 cats and 2 dogs. Cassie stayed at her aunt's empty house all day after school, minding the dogs and cats and generally having nothing special to do. On the night of September 22nd, Cassie was bored at home, so she called her boyfriend on the phone and asked him to come over. Her boyfriend's name was Matt Beckham, and he arrived at Cassie's aunt's house around 6:00 p.m. First being alone together and then being joined by 2 of Matt's friends, Brian Draper and Tori Adamjic. These 2 friends of Matt's were both 16 years old, and they went to the same school with Cassie. They were not very close, but Cassie was in contact with Brian and Tori through Matt. After Brian and Tori entered Cassie's house, all the rooms and interior and exterior, she showed the house to the boys. The boys looked at the yard, looked at the basement and the back doors of the house, and then they all went to the living room to watch a movie. They were watching a movie, and shortly before the end of the movie, Brian and Tori left the house under the pretext of going to the theater while the boys were leaving house, and Matt was busy with the movie and paying attention to the exit path of Brian and Tori, did not actually see it. Instead of leaving the front door, these 2 boys left the house through the basement door. Brian and Tori returned an hour or 2 later, this time wearing all black clothes, gloves, and white masks. They got dressed and parked their car down a street, then slowly and silently entered the house through the basement door and stayed there. It seemed like Cassie and Matt were still watching a movie because the sound of the TV was coming from upstairs. Up to this point, you might think that Brian and Tori's plan is to scare Cassie and Matt. But the matter was much more and, of course, more planned than these words. The boys made some noise from the basement to scare Matt, but none of them noticed the noise. They made a louder noise this time, but they assumed that the aunt's dogs and cats were busy in the basement. Brian and Tori couldn't scare these 2, so they decided to do something beyond the noise by turning off the power to the whole house. The power outage made Cassie and Matt a little shocked, but neither of them came to the basement to look at the electricity meter. Throw away. The boys turned some of the lights back on and worked on a new plan. Cassie was scared and restless. He put the dogs and cats in a room and closed the door. Meanwhile, when Matt saw his girlfriend's condition, he called his mother and said, "Can he stay with night so that he can feel at ease about this girl?" But his mother rejected Matt's request and instead suggested that he come with him to their house and be their guest tonight. Cassie hesitated a little when she heard Matt's mother's offer, but in the end, she didn't accept because she was responsible for her aunt's house and the dogs and cats, and she couldn't let them go. At around 10:30 p.m., Matt's mom came to pick up her son, and now Cassie was alone in the house. Matt called Tori in the car on the way back to see where the boys were going. Like he said he went to the theater and now he can't talk, Matt also assumed that the boys were sitting in the theater, and that's why Tori was talking quietly. But in reality, Brian and Tori were in the basement of Cassie's aunt's house, and the plan: they were killing 16-year-old Cassie. After the call ended, Brian cut off the electricity in the whole house again so that would be scared and give him the feeling of terror like in horror movies. But the boys still didn't get any reaction from anyone. This time they really got confused and put on their masks and gloves and went upstairs quietly. Brian had a dagger-like weapon, and Tori had a hunting knife with him when he went upstairs to find Cassie sleeping. Brian opened the door and slammed it hard to wake up and scare Cassie. When the girl woke up with a loud noise in the door, the boys brutally attacked her and stabbed her in total 30 times. Out of these 30 times, 12 of them were the heart, lungs, and vital organs of Cassie and caused the death of this 16-year-old youth, leaving Cassie drowned corpse on the couch and leaving the house. The next day, Matt and Tori met each other, and Matt told his friend that he has been trying to call his girlfriend since last night, but no one is answering. Cassie's family was also worried about their daughter. Exactly 2 days after the murder, on September 24, 2006, Aunt and Aunt's husband returned home and found Cassie's bloodied and stabbed body. Just by looking at the body, one could understand that this girl was murdered, and the police should look for a murderer. Almost a few hours after filing the case, the police officers noticed Matt Beckham, Brian Draper, and Tori Ada Magic were the last people who saw Cassie alive. All three of them were called to the police station. Tori and Brian both said they went to the theater after leaving Aunt Cassie's house, but when the police asked Tori about the theater that night, the boy said he didn't remember anything. When the police saw that these two were lying, they put more pressure on them. The boys slowly started talking, and each of them declared the other as the murderer. They said that one of them stabbed Cassie and that they had no role in the murder. Brian first said Tori killed Cassie. He committed murder, and he personally did not even touch a knife. But then he changed his words and said that under the pressure and orders of Tori, he stabbed Cassie several times. Finally, after 3 days of interrogation, he led the police to an empty field outside the city, and the officers were able to find the murder tools there while they were buried under the ground. A silver dagger with a black handle, a folding hunting knife, a red and white mask, latex gloves, and also a film strip. When the police looked at the content of the video, they saw that these two boys had taken a video of the planning before the murder, as well as their mood after the murder. Despite this film and the confessions of Brian and Tori, both boys were officially charged with first-degree murder. Tori claimed that he made the decision after watching the horror movie Scream. Like the story of this movie, they kill their friends and then go to other victims. The purpose of both of them was neither sexual motivation nor revenge. They wanted to be famous. That is, their motive for murder was to be known as a murderer. They wanted their names to be placed next to Ted Bundy and Zodiac, to write about them in all the news agencies, and to become famous by killing innocent people. On June 8, 2007, Brian was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years, and Tori received the same sentence. Currently, both of them have applied for parole many times, but they are rejected every time, and they are not expected to be released.